Good morning, bonjour, buenos dias, what's up, ni hao, sin ciao, it's me, Mr. Jordan. Today we're going to be looking at chapter 26 of The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. We'll start with a brief recap and summary of the chapter. Then we'll get into a deeper analysis and do a close reading line by line. Finally, we'll finish with some vocabulary as well as the definitions and context of those words in this chapter. Let's get right into the brief recap of chapter 26. There's two main aspects of the chapter. First, there's the ceremony. So they have intercourse again, the commander and Offred. But this time things have changed since they've started their illicit relationship together and begun to play Scrabble at night as well as exchange gifts. It's changed the power dynamics and the triangle it's now forming between the commander, Offred, and Serena Joy. There's also a flashback to the Rachel and Leah Center, or the Red Center, where Offred went through her re-education and theocratic training to become a handmaid. So we're told that at the center there's this kind of utopian idea or principle that was sold by Lydia, that this new world would be about women working together in harmony, and each would have their own garden. So there's definitely this utopian aspect to it. Almost like a Brave New World or maybe a Thomas More utopia. Offred can see now that's not really what's happened. She's just become the mistress of the commander, which was a power structure dynamic that's existed for thousands of years. So in her mind, even though she's settling into this new routine, it's not actually new. It's just a standard old love triangle. Now let's get into a closer reading of chapter 26. The first main point here we notice is that as the relationship has changed between the commander and Offred, she now feels this sense of shame or embarrassment in front of him. So when they're copulating, she looks up at him and actually has her eyes open and sees him now as a person. And of course, she in turn thinks he must also be looking at her and seeing a bit of her and her personality. She tells us, quote, "But that night, the first since the beginning of whatever this new arrangement was between us, I had no name for it. I felt shy for him. I felt, for one thing, that he was actually looking at me, and I didn't like it." So what's happening here is shame or embarrassment, right? It now feels like she's actually having an intimate moment with the commander in a room full of other people. She's not able to separate herself as she was before. She's not able to separate the mind from the body. It's her. She really is there. I was conscious that my legs were hairy in the straggly way of legs that have once been shaved but have grown back. I was conscious of my armpits too, although of course he couldn't see them. I felt uncouth. This act of copulation, fertilization perhaps, which should have been no more to me than a bee is to a flower, had become for me indecorous, an embarrassing breach of propriety, which it hadn't been before. So the power dynamic has shifted here, right? The power dynamic of sex and gender in the house is seesawing, and it's complicated further by Serena Joy's presence, both in the house and at the ceremony. Offred tells us about Serena Joy. I also felt guilty about her. I felt that I was an intruder in a territory that ought to have been hers. Now that I was seeing the commander on the sly, if only to play his games and listen to him talk, our functions were no longer as separate as they should have been in theory. Things are getting messy, right? The dynamic in the household is getting messy, and she kind of feels like she's stepping on Serena Joy's toes. It's a weird place she doesn't want to be in. But let's not forget, she doesn't like Serena Joy. In fact, she hates her. And so now there's another element to the hate as well. Offred tells us Serena Joy was a malicious and vengeful woman. I knew that. Nevertheless, I couldn't shake it, that small compunction towards her. I now had power over her, of a kind, although she didn't know it. And I enjoyed that. Why pretend? I enjoyed it a lot. So we're really seeing a change in Offred's character here. She's developing into a much fuller person, right? Rather than just a shell of a person who constantly dreams of the past and of escaping her body and thinks of her body as a vessel, she's a functioning, active character now in the story. She's sort of becoming the protagonist. But the commander could give me away so easily, by a look, by a gesture, some tiny slip, that would reveal to anyone watching that there was something between us now. He almost did it the night of the ceremony. He reached his hand as if to touch my face. I moved my head to the side to warn him away, hoping Serena Joy hadn't noticed, and he withdrew his hand again, withdrew into himself and his single-minded journey. See, they're flitting with it, right? They're right on the edge of having an actual emotional connection. And this ceremony of copulation becoming more than a job or a duty. There's also this little flashback to Aunt Lydia and sort of the notion or the idea of a collective womanhood that was being sold to the women who were retrained as handmaids. And we're told, Lydia said it will be so much better. The women will live in harmony together, all in one family. You'll be like daughters to them. And when the population level is up to scratch again, we'll no longer have to transfer you from one house to another because there'll be enough to go around. This idea of plenty, of cornucopia, right? Of enough for all. Everyone will have their own. There can be bonds of real affection, she said, blinking at us ingratiatingly. Under such conditions, women united for a common end. Here there's a real flashback to the ideals of Marxism and communism in the USSR, and of course what George Orwell was referring to and kind of bitingly critiquing in 1984 and before that in Animal Farm. But that's not how it's played out. How it's played out in the household in Gilead is as a straight up love triangle. Quote, the fact is that I'm his mistress. Men at the top have always had mistresses. Why should things be any different now? As you can see, there's a real social hierarchy being formed or being created in Gilead. By participating in the affair, she's moving up the hierarchy. But at the top, the pinnacle of power is still the commander. He is, after all, commanding the household. But even so, and stupidly enough, I'm happier than I was before. It's something to do, for one thing. Something to fill the time. At night, instead of sitting alone in my room, it's something else to think about. I don't love the commander or anything like that, but he's of interest to me. He occupies space. He is more than a shadow. This idea they're starting to embody their roles. They're starting to become two people, two humans interacting, if not on a level playing field, at least on the same. And I for him. To him, I'm no longer merely a usable body. To him, I'm not just a boat with no cargo, a chalice with no wine in it, an oven, to be crude, minus the bun. To him, I'm not merely empty. Fitting last words for the chapter. Let's get into a little vocabulary from chapter 26. Sly. Having or showing a cunning and deceitful nature. So we're told their relationship is on the sly, meaning it's a secret knowledge that could be harmful or embarrassing to both parties. And as we see, she does in fact feel embarrassed during the ceremony. Surreptitious in a secretive fashion. That is slyness. Uncouth. Lacking good manners, refinement, or grace. So someone's a little rough around the edges, a little dirty, hard and fast. Lacking sophistication or delicacy. And it comes from the idea of being wild or Spartan or remote, like outdoors and rugged. Literally means the unknown, propriety. So this means propriety is to conform to conventions or accepted standards of behaviors and morals. So it's the details, rules of conventionally considered behavior that are correct. So again, it's referring to this idea, there's a new correct, there's a new set of rules and principles in Gilead. And they're not actually the ideals that Aunt Lydia was dreaming of. Rather than something utopian, they're something messy and uncomfortable and human. Here things are amalgamated. So to amalgamate is to combine or to unite one form in an organization or structure. So maybe two parts of a city are amalgamated into a whole. East and West Berlin become Berlin. Or two political parties join forces and amalgamate. Or in this instance, Alfred and the commander, coming from the opposite sides, are now amalgamating. Literally in Latin, amalgamate means to form a soft mass. So this is Atwood's also punning on the idea of their bodies coming together during the act for the ceremony. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you liked the video. Put any comments or questions below for me and I'll get back to them as soon as I can. And thanks so much for watching. That was chapter 26 of The Handmaid's Tale. We will be back next time with chapter 27.